The whole room went quiet the way a room only goes quiet when someone has said the thing everyone was too polite to say. My cousin Marcus stood at the head of the long table with a glass of somebody else's wine in his hand, and he pointed it at me, sitting there in the same brown jacket I'd worn to every family gathering for 11 years, and he said it loud enough that the kids at the far end stopped chewing. "Let's just be honest for once," he said, smiling like it was a toast. "Frank married Eleanor for the money. We all know it. He was a nobody with a pickup truck, and she came from a good family, and he saw his chance, and he took it. Good for him, I guess." A couple people laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was easier than looking at me. And Eleanor, my wife of 38 years, set her fork down very carefully, the way she does when she's about to cry and doesn't want anyone to know. That was the part one couldn't forgive. Not the insult to me, the look on her face. So I did the only thing a man like me knows how to do in a moment like that. I said nothing. I smiled. I picked up my iced tea. And I waited because there was exactly one thing nobody in that room understood about the money Marcus was so sure I'd married into. It was never Eleanor's money. It was mine. But to make you understand why that mattered, why it landed the way it did an hour later, when the whole thing came apart in front of 40 people, I have to take you back to who I really am. Because the man Marcus described, the nobody with the pickup truck, that man was a costume I'd been wearing on purpose for a very, very long time. My name is Frank. I'm 63 years old, and for most of my life, I have been what people generously call unremarkable. I don't say that with sadness. I say it because it's the truth, and because it was, in a strange way, the most valuable thing I ever built. People underestimate a quiet man. They tell you things they shouldn't. They show you exactly who they are, because they've decided you don't matter enough to hide it. I grew up 2 hours north of here, in a town you've never heard of, the son of a man who fixed refrigeration units for grocery stores and restaurants. Cold rooms, walk-in freezers, the unglamorous machinery that keeps a whole town's food from spoiling and that nobody thinks about until it breaks. My father taught me the trade the way other fathers teach their sons to fish. By the time I was 19, I could hear a compressor going bad from across a parking lot. Here's what nobody in the family ever bothered to learn. I didn't stay a repairman. When I was 31, I noticed something. Every restaurant, every grocery store, every hospital cafeteria and hotel kitchen in 3 counties was leasing their refrigeration and calling somebody, usually somebody like my father, every time it failed. It was chaos, expensive chaos. So I borrowed against everything I had, which was almost nothing, and I started a company that did it differently. We didn't just fix the units. We owned them. We leased them out on service contracts. We maintained them. And when a walk-in cooler went down at 2 in the morning at a hospital, our truck was there before the ice cream melted. It was boring. It was invisible. And it printed money. By the time I was 45, my company serviced 11 states. By 50, I'd bought out 3 competitors. I owned the building my headquarters sat in, and then I owned a lot of other buildings too, because a man who understands boring, reliable cash flow eventually starts buying the boring, reliable things that produce it. Commercial real estate, warehouses, the unsexy backbone of towns. I never told the family any of it, partly because they never asked. And partly, I'll be honest with you, because of Eleanor. I met Eleanor at a wedding when I was 24, and I have never in my life recovered from it, and I never wanted to. Her family, back then, was what people around here called a good family. Her father was a well-known dentist. They had the house on the hill, the country club membership, the whole picture. And when a refrigeration mechanic's son started showing up to take their daughter to dinner in a truck that smelled faintly of compressor oil, you can imagine how that landed. They tolerated me. Barely. There was always this understanding, unspoken but total, that Eleanor was marrying down. That she was the prize, and I was the lucky, undeserving man who'd somehow gotten his hands on it. And here's the thing I need you to understand, because it's the whole hinge of this story. I let them believe it. Because Eleanor never cared about any of it. She married me when I had $400 in the bank and a business plan her father openly laughed at. She married me for me. And so, when her family looked down their noses and decided I was the lesser one, I let them. What did I care? I had her. Let them keep their little story. What none of them knew, what nobody knew for decades, was that within 15 years, the good family wasn't good anymore. Her father made some terrible investments in the 80s. The dental practice got sold to cover debts. The house on the hill went to the bank quietly, in a way the family worked very hard to keep quiet. By the time Eleanor's parents were old, the money that everyone assumed she'd brought into our marriage was long, long gone. And who do you think quietly stepped in? When Eleanor's mother needed full-time care in her final years, that was me. When her father's medical bills came due, that was me. I paid for all of it, and I did it in a way that let them keep their dignity, that let them believe right up to the end that they were still the family that had money. Nobody knew. That was the point. You don't help people so they'll thank you. You help them so they'll be okay. The thanks is for small men. So when Marcus stood up at that reunion and announced to the entire family that I'd married Eleanor for her money, he had it exactly, perfectly, catastrophically backwards. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about Marcus. Because to understand why what happened next felt like justice, real, quiet, earned justice, you have to understand who he was. And more importantly, you have to understand what he owed. Marcus is my cousin on my mother's side. He's about 15 years younger than me, and he is in every way my opposite. Where I built something boring and real, Marcus chased shiny things. He's the kind of man who's always 6 months away from the deal that's going to change everything. Over the years, it's been a nightclub, a line of energy drinks, a real estate flipping empire that was mostly one duplex and a lot of Instagram photos. He wears watches that cost more than my first house and drives cars he leases and can barely afford. And he talks, my God, does he talk about success, about hustle, about how most people just don't have a vision. He'd taken over hosting the family reunion 3 years back, and he'd turned it from a potluck at my Uncle Ray's lake house into a catered event at a rented country club hall. Because Marcus doesn't do anything unless there's an audience for it. And here is the detail that matters. The detail I want you to hold on to because it's the whole thing. 2 years before that reunion, Marcus's real estate empire had started to come apart. He was drowning. He came to me, quietly, hat in hand, in my kitchen on a Tuesday night because word had trickled up through the family that Frank does okay for himself. And he needed a loan to keep from losing everything. I gave it to him. More than a loan. Actually, his entire business, the office he ran his so-called empire out of, the retail space downstairs that gave him what little legitimate income he had, was in a commercial building that had gone into foreclosure. I bought that building. I bought it, and I let Marcus keep operating out of it. And I charged him a rent so low it was practically a gift. And I never, not once, told a single soul. Not the family. Not Marcus's mother. Not even Marcus, entirely. He knew he'd gotten help from an investor, but he'd spent 2 years carefully never mentioning it, letting everyone believe he'd clawed his way back on his own. He genuinely seemed to have convinced himself it was true. So on the day of that reunion, the man standing at the head of the table calling me a gold-digging nobody with a pickup truck was standing there because I owned a roof over his entire livelihood. He just didn't know it yet. The reunion started fine. They always do. I'd shaken hands. I'd let the younger cousins tell me about their jobs. I'd complimented the food. Eleanor was radiant in a blue dress, moving through the room the way she always does, remembering everyone's children's names. And I stood near the wall the way I always do, holding a drink I wasn't really drinking, watching. I noticed Marcus was drinking fast. I noticed his laugh was too big. I noticed his wife wasn't talking to him. I've spent 40 years reading rooms full of men who are about to make bad decisions. It's most of what a business actually is, and I could see one coming off of Marcus like heat off a road. The little digs started around the second hour. Frank, you still driving that old truck? Man, some people just don't like to spend money. Huh? A laugh. Or don't have it to spend. A smaller laugh. I let it go. I've been letting Marcus go his whole life. You know, Eleanor could have married anybody, he said a while later, to a little cluster of relatives. Not quite quiet enough. Homecoming queen, that family, that house. Wild how things work out. I let that go too. But Eleanor heard that one, and I watched her jaw tighten, and I put my hand on the small of her back, and I said, very quietly, it's all right. Let him. It is not all right, Frank, she whispered. It's never been all right. And you always just, I know, I said. I know I do. Trust me. Just a little longer. She looked at me. 38 years. She can read me like I can read a room. Something in my face made her go still. Frank, she said slowly, what did you do? He smiled to her. Nothing yet. And then Marcus, 3 glasses in, tapped his knife against his wine glass and stood up to make a toast, and I knew the little longer was over. I just want to say a few words. Marcus announced about family. The room quieted the polite way. He talked about legacy. He talked about how far he'd come. He talked at length about building something from nothing, which was rich, and then his eyes found me by the wall, and I saw the mean little spark light up, and I knew he couldn't help himself. And you know, he said, family's about being honest with each other. So let's be honest. The smile, the wine glass, pointed at me. Frank married Eleanor for the money. We all know it. He was a nobody with a pickup truck. She came from a good family, and he saw his chance, and he took it. Good for him, I guess. The laughter, the polite, cowardly laughter. Eleanor's fork set down. Eleanor's face. And me, picking up my iced tea, saying nothing. I want to tell you what 40 people not defending you feels like, because you may know it yourself. It's not loud. It's a soft sound. The sound of everyone deciding at once that it's not their business. My Uncle Ray looked at his plate. The cousins looked at their phones. Eleanor's hands were shaking in her lap. And then a chair scraped back. It wasn't mine. At the far end of the table, my Aunt Diane, Marcus's own mother, 79 years old, small and silver and fierce, stood up, and her voice, when it came out, was shaking with something that wasn't sadness. It was fury. Marcus, she said, sit down. He blinked. Ma, I am Gust, sheet. Down. He didn't. And so my Aunt Diane, God bless her, turned to the whole room and did the thing I never would have done for myself. You want to talk about honesty, Aunt Diane said, and her voice carried now, thin and hard as wire. Fine. Let's be honest. Do you know who paid for my cancer treatment? The room went a different kind of quiet. 3 years ago, she said, when the insurance stopped and I was going to lose the house, and none of you even knew because I was too proud to say it. Do you know who wrote the check? Every month, for 1.5 years, and made me promise not to tell. She was looking straight at me now, and I gave her the smallest shake of my head. Please, Diane, don't. And for the first time in her life, my Aunt Diane ignored me. It was Frank, she said. You could hear the air conditioning. The nobody, she said, with a pickup truck. Her voice cracked. He saved my life, and he made me swear not to tell a soul. And I've kept that promise for 3 years. And I will not sit at this table and listen to my own son call that man a gold digger. And Marcus, I'll give him this. He tried to laugh it off. Ma, that's okay, so he helped out. That's nice, but that doesn't mean Marcus. I finally spoke. First time all night. I stood up. I set down my iced tea. And I want you to understand that I wasn't angry. I've been angry in my life, and it never once helped me. I just felt very, very tired and very clear. "Do you know who owns the Hartley building?" I asked him. He stopped. Something flickered behind his eyes. "The what?" "The Hartley building," I said. "On 5th. The one with your office on the 3rd floor, and the retail space you rent downstairs. The building you almost lost 2 years ago before an investor stepped in and saved it." I watched the color leave his face one shade at a time. "You ever wonder who that investor was, Marcus?" The room was so silent I could hear Eleanor breathing beside me. "No," Marcus said. "That's not. My accountant handles your rent check," I said gently, "has my company's name on the top of it. It's had my name on it for 2 years. LLC, so you'd never think to look. Delgado Holdings." I let that sit. "I own the building your whole life runs out of, Marcus. I've owned it since the week you were 48 hours from bankruptcy and too proud to tell anyone. I kept your rent at 1/3 of market so you could keep pretending you'd fixed it yourself. And I never said a word, because that's what family does, you understand. You help, and you keep your mouth shut, and you let a man keep his dignity." I looked around the table. At Uncle Ray, who'd looked at his plate. At the cousins who'd laughed. "I have never once," I said, "told any of you what I have or what I've done, because it was never any of your business, and because Eleanor and I have never needed you to think we were something. But I will not stand here and let this man tell my wife she's settled for me." My voice didn't rise. It didn't have to. She is the best thing that ever happened to a boy who fixed freezers. And I've spent 38 years quietly making sure that every person in this family who ever needed help got it, including you, Marcus. Especially you. Marcus opened his mouth. Nothing came out. "Married for money," I said, and for the first time, I let myself smile. "So, the money was always mine." He left before dessert. I didn't call his loan. I didn't raise his rent. I didn't need to do any of it. That's the part younger men never understand, that the point was never to hurt him. The point was simply that the truth, once it's in the room, does its own quiet work. You don't have to swing the hammer. You just have to set it on the table where everyone can see it. The reunion, strangely, got better after he left. People came up to me one at a time, the way they do. Uncle Ray shook my hand and couldn't quite meet my eye and said, "Frank, I didn't. I never knew," and I told him the truth, which was, "I know you didn't, Ray. That was on purpose." Aunt Diane held my hand in both of hers for a long time and didn't say anything at all, and she didn't have to. And Eleanor, my Eleanor, waited until we were in the truck, the old pickup, driving home under a sky going pink at the edges, and then she reached over and took my hand off the gear shift and held it. 38 years, she said quietly. "And you never told them. Any of it. Didn't need to. You let my whole family think you married up. That you were lucky to have me." She was crying a little and smiling. When the whole time, I said, "I was the luckiest man alive." And that part was always true. She laughed and wiped her eyes and looked out at the road. And after a while she said, "Marcus's face, though. Eleanor, I'm just saying, Frank, his face." And I laughed, God help me, all the way home. Here's what I've learned, and it's the only reason I'm telling you any of this. The loudest man in the room is almost never the strongest one. He's usually the one with the most to hide. Marcus needed everyone to believe he was rich because he was terrified of being seen as poor. He needed to make me small so he could feel big. And the whole time, the actual strength in that room was sitting quietly by the wall in an 11-year-old jacket, drinking iced tea, owing nobody anything and quietly holding half of them up. Real wealth doesn't announce itself. Real strength doesn't need an audience. And the people who love you for who you are, when you have nothing, those are the only people whose opinion of you will ever be worth a single dollar. I built a fortune fixing the things nobody wanted to think about. And I married a woman who'd have loved me if I'd never built a thing at all. Marcus can keep his watches. I got the better end of the deal, and I have every single day for 38 years. If you've ever had a quiet person in your life who was stronger than everyone gave them credit for, tell me about them in the comments. I read every one, and if this story meant something to you, take a second to subscribe because I share a new one every week. The ones nobody says out loud until somebody finally does.